Hey Elementor fans, in this video I'm going to walk through how to create a responsive navigation menu for your WordPress site. And here's an example of what I've built. What we're going to do is we're going to create a header navigation area that has a logo that links back to your homepage, that has a call to action button, and then that has a hamburger icon that will open up a menu here in mobile view. And just to give you guys an idea of what this looks like on desktop, it's going to be a pretty simple menu with your logo, again, linking to the homepage, your simple navigation. You can have some drop downs or not, just depends on your specific site, and then the call to action button over here on the right. So I'm going to walk through all the different settings on how I did this. Obviously, you have a lot of options in terms of colors, and I used like a little cloud shape divider here just to try something different. You can go with something just simple background color. You can go with plain white. You could do a gradient. Tons of different options from a design standpoint, but on this video, I'll go through all those options, but I'm really going to focus on what I did to, in particular, switch this call to action button over here and put it on this side and have the main hamburger icon here on the right. That's where most users are going to expect that. So just how I got that to work, how I did this drop down with the different colors, and then I've also got it being sticky on mobile devices as well, so it always stays in the viewport at the very top of the screen. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing that we need to do is we're going to come to Templates and Theme Builder. This is where we can set a global header to appear on every single page of our site, or even only specific pages, and I'll get into how to do that in a second. So here we are in Elementor's Theme Builder, and I've got some existing ones that we'll look at in a minute, but if you're creating this from scratch, you'll want to hover over Header and click this plus icon. That tells Elementor that we want to create a new header theme builder template. Now you'll be presented with a list of specific header templates that Elementor has created for us. Now we can simply just import these. A lot of these are going to be only available in the Pro version of Elementor, but you need the Pro version to use Theme Builder anyway. That's why all of these have the Pro tag. The one downside to importing a header, I guess the upside is that a lot of the settings are going to be configured for you. However, one of the downsides is that Elementor is making a lot of design decisions, and they're setting a lot of the typography, the colors, a whole bunch of settings that is going to add a lot more CSS to your site. And you may not want those settings. You're going to have to go through and maybe uncheck a whole bunch of things or clear out a bunch of different settings that you don't want. To me, I much prefer to create something from scratch on my own. That way I'm only adding the styles that I know I need, and I know where everything is because I've created it, I've added those styles. You just get to make it your own that way, and it's usually a little bit cleaner and a little bit less code to do it this way. So to get a blank template to start from, you can come up here and just click the X icon, which will close this out and give you a blank canvas to work with. So at any time, if you did want to import a template, you could come back and click over this folder icon here, and you'd hover over and just click Insert if you really want to import one of these guys. But this video is going to focus on creating our own from scratch. One other important thing I want to mention before we get started is this is going to use we'll call it the older version of Elementor. What I mean by that is it's not going to use Elementor's new containers, their new Flexbox containers. So those were released in a newer version of Elementor in version 2.6 as a alpha beta feature that isn't quite ready yet, but you can start testing with it. This is going to use the older version before that. So things will look a little bit different, and the settings are going to be different with the new Flexbox containers. Once that gets out of beta and gets released to everyone to use on live sites, I'll do another video on how to create the same thing with those Flexbox containers. Just note that this one uses things before that Flexbox container, sort of more the traditional Elementor way. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up our column structure. So we'll click on the red plus icon right here. And for us, we're going to have three different columns. We'll have a logo in the first column, we'll have the navigation in the middle column, and then we'll have our call to action button in the third column. So I'm just going to click on this one right here for three columns. They're not going to be they're evenly sized right now, but I'm going to adjust that, and you can actually just use here, if you hover on this line here, you'll get an option to actually just move these over. You can also change the width numbers here in the settings, which I'll show you in a minute, but we'll take care of that once we've added our elements in here and we get a better idea for how much space we'll need in each of these three columns. So I'm going to open up the one I've already created and go through the settings using that, but I just wanted to show you how to get started here by creating your new three-column layout. So here we are in the one I've already created, and the first thing I actually like to do is come down here to the far bottom left corner and click this settings cog. And what you can do is you can actually set the HTML tag that's going to be used for this entire piece. So I think by default it's just a div, which is fine, and that'll work just fine. But technically this is a header, especially if it's our global header on our website that we're going to use on almost every single page. We want to set the HTML tag to be a header tag. So that's the first thing I'll do there. And then what I'll do next is I will start actually adding my Elementor widgets into these three different columns. So here in this first column, I've actually added an image widget. So you can search for the image widget, and it's just this simple image right here. So I've added that into this first column, and I will just go ahead and click on it so that we can edit it and see what kind of settings that I've got here. You can click here and choose your image, so this will open up your media library. If you haven't already uploaded a logo or you don't have a logo already on your site, you can just drag it from your desktop into this area. It'll upload it for you. The one big thing that I will mention here is you want to make sure you add an alt text to your logo. That's just great for both accessibility, usability, and SEO as well. So you'll put the name of your company there, logo, something like that for the alt text. Once you've selected your logo, go ahead and click Insert Media, and that will add the logo in there for you. Another important thing that I like to take note of here is the image size. By default, I believe it's going to be set to full. However, if you uploaded a very large image, which you may be using in other areas of your site, but for this specific area of your site, you don't need the full image. It's going to sometimes it's going to load a much larger image than you need. So I choose medium here because it's 300 by 300. We don't need this to be any wider than 300 pixels, so 300 by 300 works really well. We set the alignment to the left. That's going to make sure that it's all the way on the left side of this column, which is what we want. And then for our link, I'm going to choose custom URL. You could choose no link if you wanted to, but I like to link this back to our homepage. So I choose custom URL, and then what we can do here is I'll show you, you can put in a custom URL, like here is an example of google.com, or what you can do is you can click on dynamic tags and just choose site URL, and that will actually link back to your homepage. So that's just a different way to do it. You could just type in the name of your homepage right there. That works the same way. I like to click the dynamic tags and go site URL. That covers everything that we're going to adjust for the image. Now let's take a look at this next option here. So we notice that this is a nav menu. So again, we can use the search feature and search for nav. We don't want post navigation, that's something different. We want this nav menu. So we'll drag that here into our middle column, and now we have this nav menu that we can edit. The very first thing we need to do is we need to choose which menu to use. So here I've got two options. I've got main nav and I've got shop links. And you may have a question of where these come from. Well, let me show you that now. So here I am on the appearance and menus page within the WordPress admin area. And you'll see here, select the menu to edit. I've got these two. So this is where you actually create menus that you want to use in different spots throughout your WordPress site. So we could create a new menu by clicking this link right here, and then we can come over here to the left and we can add a bunch of different menu items by checking them and then saying add to menu. I've already created a main nav menu, so I've given it this menu name of main nav. This is what shows up in Elementor to let us know which menu we're actually using. So just remember what you've named what you want to be your main menu here. And then I've already got it created. The indentation here, you can drag these over, and that means that you're going to have drop downs. So you can make any adjustments you need to these menus, or you, like I said, can create a new one. Just make sure that you save your menu at the very bottom. So we need to have that created, and we need to remember this menu name. And then we'll jump back over into Elementor and continue on. So as I said, here is our main nav. That's the specific menu we want to use, and that has about some services, some shop links, and a contact link. So make sure you choose the appropriate menu right there. We want to leave the layout to horizontal by default. That just means these are going to be in a row next to each other. Just to show you what vertical looks like, you might have that in a different area of your site, but for here, we want the standard horizontal. Align, now I am choosing align to the right because I want to push these items over here to the right of this column. So this column actually spans from right here all the way to here. So I want these over to the right. You could put them to the left, you could center them, it's totally up to you. I like moving things over to the right so they'll be close to this call to action button as well. So that's this option here, just to show you there's left, there's center, and there's right. Pointer, I'm going to keep this on none. This just adds different styles for when you hover over those items. You can do underlines, you can do overlines, different options that Elementor has here, but we're just going to stick with none, keep it simple. The submenu indicator, I believe the default may be to not have anything right here. I would suggest that you do use some kind of a down caret or an arrow to indicate that there are menu items underneath that. That's pretty self-explanatory. You wouldn't want to have no indication if you do have drop-downs. So we've set that. You can click on here and choose anything from your icon library. They give you some recommendations, but you can come here to all icons and choose whatever you'd like. Now what I'm going to do, before I go through these mobile drop-down settings, I'm going to come down here and click on responsive mode, and I'll come up to the top and choose mobile. So I'm doing this so that we can see what some of these different options look like. So for our mobile drop-down, we can choose a breakpoint option. So what this means is if we choose tablet, that means that anything that is any screen size that's less than 1024 pixels will show this mobile drop-down. If we just choose mobile, then the things that are 768 between 1023, they're all going to continue to use the navigation that we saw here. So it's up to us what we want to do. I'm just going to choose mobile for this example. So on tablet, we'll keep the main navigation and not use a hamburger icon here. Now, one of the really important settings that we need to do is this full width option. So this stretches the drop-down menu to full width. If we don't do this, it tries to keep it in that third column. Remember, we've got a 3-column layout here. It keeps those menu items in the third column. We obviously don't want that. So checking full width gives us what we would expect and that look that we want for this drop-down menu. So this is a really important setting here for full width. Make sure you turn this on. And then alignment, if we do center or a side is basically left alignment here. If you're using an RTL, a right to left language, then I think a side will put them on the right-hand side, or we can just center them. So that's going to show you these guys here in the drop-down. So we'll do a side and keep them on the left. And then the toggle button, hamburger, is really the only option. If you do none, then it will display them all of the time. And there's no actual button to turn them on and off. They'll just always be there. So we'll stick with the hamburger. And then the alignment, we want to move the hamburger all the way to the right side of this column. So you'll see a little bit of a shift as we do that, but because this column is really small anyway, there's really not far for it to go to the left or the center, but I like to align it to the right just to make sure it's kind of lined up there right on that right corner of the browser window. And I'll jump back to desktop real quick and just talk about the button. There's really not a whole lot to go over here. We just searched for the button widget. We added this button over here to that third column, and I actually didn't do, the only setting that you could change would be the link, which would be your call to action link, and obviously your text, you're going to change that to whatever you want. I'm just using an example here that says take action, and I've actually come into site settings and I've set up my button styles in my theme here to be yellow and black just for these buttons, these call to action buttons. So I've set everything up in those site settings, so there isn't actually any styling settings that I changed here for this button at all. It's all being done by the global styles in Elementor site settings. But we'll add that button here to the third column. And while we're here on desktop, we can drag these columns to be the appropriate widths that we need. So for our logo, I would drag this column and just use the amount of space you need to fit your logo. And then any extra space you have is going to be here in the middle column with this navigation. And then for this call to action button, again, you're going to just drag this over and pretty much put it right to the edge of what you need for that button to just have enough space. So once we do that, we can actually also click on the column icons here. If you wanted to, you could adjust these column widths manually by typing in % that way. Just make sure as you do that that everything does equal to 100% when you type them in manually. So sometimes it can be a little bit safer to just drag because Elementor will adjust them automatically for you. If you do type them in manually, then you should pay a little closer attention to make sure that all 3 columns equal to 100%. So sometimes just dragging is easier. So we've got that on desktop. We've got those column widths to our liking. Now there's a few other things that I recommend we do. So for the section itself, under layout, one thing I like to do is vertical align middle. So if we do default, you'll see how this logo went up to the top and this button went up to the top. So by default, vertical align is going to be to the top. So that moves things upwards. But if we do middle, then it's going to vertically align everything in the middle. So it'll all be lined up in the same row. And I just think that looks nice. It creates an equal amount of space above and below the button, above and below the logo, and everything looks really good. So vertical align middle will get you that. The next thing that we can do, this is where you have a lot of flexibility, but we'll come to the Style tab, and we can choose some background, we can choose a border if we want, a shape divider, some box shadow. We can do a lot of different things here. So what I've done is I've just used a plain pink color for the background. And then under border, what I've done is I haven't actually added a border. Sometimes people like to just do a solid, you could do a solid 1 pixel border, but what you'd want to do is just put that on the bottom. So we'd actually just have 1 on the bottom and we'd 0 it out everywhere else. So that's one common option, is just to do a solid 1 pixel border on the bottom. If we don't want to do that, another popular option is to do a box shadow, which will add, you can kind of see it here, it's pretty faint, but just underneath the bottom, there's a little bit of a box shadow. So we can click on the pencil icon next to box shadow. We can, what I like to do is usually choose black, which is all the way down here in the bottom left corner, and then drag this opacity slider down a little bit until you get something in the maybe 20 to 40 opacity range. You'll see here's 32% opacity, something in that range. And then you can adjust the blur to kind of get the right amount of blurriness below there for your shadow. You can play around with these settings, especially the blur and the spread will give you different kinds of different shadows that look in a slightly different way. So feel free to play around with those, but that'll get you that box shadow look. So that's what we're going to go for there. And then the final thing I'll show you is that you notice these little kind of bubbles here. This is using Elementor's shape divider. This is totally optional. It may not fit with the design of your site at all, but I just wanted to show you that you can do some kind of things like this and add some subtle texture to your header if you want. So I've got a bottom shape divider, and I chose clouds. You can also do, tilt opacity, and that kind of adds this line here through there. You can do fan opacity. It will give you kind of a couple different lines up and down. So you can do different things, but I chose clouds. And what you can do here to kind of get a nice subtle effect is you can either choose white all the way up here in the top left or black down in the bottom left, and then adjust the opacity filter. You can try it with white, try it with black, see what looks the best. It's going to be dependent upon which color you have and what text color you're using for your links and things here. But you can play around with that and then play around with the height. So this will expand the clouds and make them a lot taller. And you'll see as I move this in and out how that kind of changes things a little bit and gives you more or less clouds. There we go. And you can also, let's see, you can also flip, which will just kind of reflect it or invert it and just see how that affects things a little bit. So play around with shape dividers if you want to. If not, just keep it super simple with just a basic background color. The final thing I'll mention before we jump back over to mobile is the height option. So we are, again, editing our section. We're on the Layout tab. And here on height, what we can do is if we wanted, we can set a minimum height. So if we wanted this to be at least a minimum of 50 or upwards of 60, looks like it's already about 66, 67. As we start to go higher, you'll see it adjusted there. So you can add a minimum height, and this is adjustable on all desktop, tablet, and mobile sizes. So that is something you can do if you would like to. I'll show you where this will come into play in a little bit with just another fancy kind of technique that you can add. But for right now, let's just turn this off. But I just wanted to show that to you. If it's pretty small by default and you wanted it to be a little bit taller, you could come in here and add a specific, probably pixel value makes the most sense for a global header for that minimum height. So here we are back in mobile view, and we've adjusted most of the settings that we need here. But in mobile view, what you'll want to do is you'll want to readjust the column widths. So I don't think we've gone over that yet. Once you've set them on your desktop, you'll want to come into mobile view and adjust them on mobile. So here for mobile, what I've done is I've adjusted them manually. So I've set the logo to be 35, and then I've clicked on this column here and set that to 16, and then this column here, let me actually open up my navigator. So this third column here with the button is set to 49. So 49 and 16 and 35 equals 100. So we have a nice, everything covers the entire width of this section. Now, the big thing here that you might be wondering how to do is how did I get this navigation over here on the right and the button in the middle? Because on desktop, remember, we've got our navigation in the middle and our call to action button is on the right. So how did I switch those? Well, one thing I'll show you first off is, let me close this back up, is in our section, we do have an option here. If we come to the Advanced tab for our section, we do have an option to reverse columns on tablet and or on mobile. We can check to enable those. However, we don't want to reverse these. We don't want to take the logo and put it all the way on the right and the button and put it all the way on the left. We just want to flip-flop these two, the navigation and the button. So I use just some simple custom CSS to achieve that. So what I did is I clicked on my second column, which is my navigation area. And first thing I did here is I went to Advanced and then Custom CSS. And you'll notice I've got what's called a media query. So this first line here of CSS just says that only apply this CSS if the maxed width is 767 pixels. So everything below 767 pixels, screen size wise, will apply this CSS. So it's only going to happen on mobile devices because that's our breakpoint. Then I'm using Elementor's got here selector to target the wrapper element. So what I'm doing is I'm targeting this column specifically, and since LearnDash is actually already using some Flexbox code, even in there before they offered the Flexbox containers, they're still using Flexbox code. So we can actually use a CSS property called order. And what this does is basically just tells the browser what order to put these different columns in. So we've got this section is actually using Flexbox CSS, and we've got 3 columns. So by default, this first column is going to be 1, this is going to be 2, this is going to be 3. But what we're doing here is we're coming to the second one, and we're saying make this the order of 3. And then on our third one, if we come to Advanced and Custom CSS, we're saying make this the order of 2. So we're just changing the order on smaller devices, on mobile devices here, with this simple line of CSS on each of these 2 columns. So you got to put the CSS here on column 2 to say make this number 3, and then on number 3 we're coming in here and saying make this number 2. So that little CSS there on each of those 2 columns is what flip-flops these guys and puts the button here and the navigation here. And that's what gets us this beautiful little navigation menu. The final thing I'll mention is the sizes and colors here of the different items in the dropdown. So what we'll do is we'll edit the nav menu, and we'll come over here to Style. And I've got the text color for normal here. Text color is set to black. And then hover and active, we're not changing the text color at all. Actually, excuse me, this is all the main menu, so you can disregard this. This is only going to apply on desktop. What we want to do for this menu here is the drop-down menu. And Elementor even tells us on desktop this will affect the submenus, and then on mobile this will affect the entire menu, meaning this entire piece right here. So we've got our normal styles, our hover styles, and our active styles. So I'm actually not doing anything for the normal style, so this is just going to use the same thing it's using on desktop. But when we hover, I'm changing the color to black and putting a light gray background color. And then on the active ones, this is when you're actually on that page. So if we were viewing the About page right now, we're on it. I'm using a light pink background and a dark pink text color. So switching between these guys here, a lot of people miss these three buttons for normal, hover, and active. That's how we get the gray background and the pink with the pink text here for active. And then typography applies to all of them. You can only change that once. You can't change the typography for hover and active. But all I did here was come to size and change the pixels to 14. By default, I think Elementor uses a little bit smaller of a size here, but I like at least 14 pixels for mobile, maybe even a little bit larger. You want your clickable area to be pretty tall, just based on the screen itself being smaller on mobile. Certain people have larger fingers or different disorders as well to be able to touch different areas. So it's just a lot easier and more accessible for folks if you give them a fairly large clickable area. So I just changed that typography right there. The other thing I did is I added this box shadow to the very bottom of our menu. So I did that with the box shadow option right here for Dropdown. So we just click on that, and the same kind of things apply. Just come here, add some transparency down on the bottom, and then play around with the blur settings and the vertical offset until you get something that you really like. But that's what this shadow down here is coming from right there. And then horizontal padding and vertical padding. You'll see as I move the horizontal padding, let's do that one first, that bumps things over to the right because we've got things aligned here on the left-hand side. That's just basically the text indent for those guys there. And then the vertical padding is what you'd expect it to be. It's going to add vertical padding within each one of those different nav options. So something around the 15 is pretty good. I probably wouldn't go much lower than that because then there's not enough clickable area there. The divider, this is what adds the gray line between each one of these. You could do none, but to me, I like to have a divider there. I think it just helps the user differentiate between the different menu options. So you can do different border types. I think solid is going to be the most commonly used here. Change the color, so I've just got that light gray color, and then a border width of 1. And then the distance, this is the last option. This is not related to the divider. This dictates the actual menu itself and how far up or down it goes. So you'll notice as I move this, it's bumping that menu down, and then this brings it back up. You basically want to try to just match it up with the very bottom of the header itself. So, or maybe even just a slight overlap. So I think that looks really good there with 10 or maybe 11 is a perfect alignment there with the top of that menu. So that's what that distance option is. And then finally, we come to the toggle button. You can change your styles here. So what I've done is under normal mode, I've got a background color of white and a text color of black. And then on hover, I'm just flip-flopping them. So when I hover over this button, it goes to a black background with white text. So that's all that is. You can adjust the size of this button. I like the default that Elementor uses, so I just leave that blank. Border width and border radius, you can add a border color to this. If you do add one, it's just going to use the text color that you've got set here as the border color. You'll see we can do 2 pixels so that you can really see it there. And then border radius, if you wanted this to like be a circle, you could do %50, and that would create a circle for you. Or you could also do 0 pixels, and that'll make it perfectly square instead of the default rounded corners that Elementor uses by default. So we'll just leave all those to the default there, and we've got our nice looking toggle button right there. And one of the last things we'll do is we want to make this menu sticky on mobile devices so that it's always in the viewport when we scroll down. So what we'll do for that is we'll come up here back to edit the section. And on the Advanced tab, we'll come down to Motion Effects. And we have this option for sticky. And you can do none, top, or bottom. So we want it sticky to the top of the page. And then here, you can choose to have it sticky on different device sizes. So in this example, we're just going to have it on mobile. So we're going to get rid of tablet and desktop. So it's just sticky on mobile. We don't need any type of offset that can actually move it down from the top, but we want it pinned to the very, very top of the window here. So we're not going to do any offset. We're going to leave that as is. And that is what will make it sticky on mobile devices. But yet we can come here, and on desktop it will not be sticky. It will disappear as soon as we start to scroll down. So that is the sticky option there for mobile. The final thing I'll show you is kind of just a little bonus tip. This is something that a lot of people may not want to do, but it could add just a little bit of uniqueness to your main header menu up here at the top of the page. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another section below this guy. And in this section, we are going to set a minimum height of maybe like well, let's do like 20 pixels. So we're going to set a minimum height. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just add a shape divider. So we're going to do it on the top, and let's try tilt opacity. Let's do our pink color. Actually, maybe fan opacity. That looks kind of cool. All right, so now we're going to mess with the height a little bit, and we're just going to have it a little bit like that. And width, I don't think we really need to mess with that too much. Let's just leave that at the default. You could do what I'm doing here with a lot of these different options. I'm just trying to choose one that I think will look kind of neat. So we're going to do that. And now what we're going to do is we want to make this sticky. So we come to motion effects again. We're going to do sticky top. We're going to do only on mobile. And then we'll do the offset. Let's do 50 as the offset. So we don't want this to stick to the very, very top of the screen. We want it to stick below our actual header. So that's why I'm using the offset of 50. The other thing I'm going to do is come to responsive, and I'm going to hide it on desktop and hide it on tablet, because we only want this to show up on mobile. You could have it show up on desktop as well and adjust, your styles, your width, your height, that kind of stuff for this to show up on desktop too. But we're just going to do this for mobile because this is mainly a how to create a mobile navigation header. So we've got the just showing on mobile now. We've got it sticky with an offset of 50. The other thing I'll do, if we're going to do this, I'm going to come here to this top section that has our main header in it, and I'm going to come to layout, and I will set a minimum height of 50 just to make sure that that matches up with where this is going to be sticky. And once we do that, as we start to scroll here, we've got a little bit of opacity on this guy as we scroll, but it's still part of that top menu. So you can add this cool little effect if you'd like. One thing I did was I actually chose, let's see what it looks like if we just do tilt. So now you've just got kind of like a slanted looking menu on one side, which kind of adds just a nice geometrical sort of design element. If that fits with your site, if that's something you want to play around with, then as you scroll here, you've still got that sticky piece of your your extended menu there, which looks kind of neat. So that's something that you guys can play around with if you'd like to give it a shot, but I just wanted to show you that as an extra option. So now that we've created this awesome responsive header and navigation for our mobile site, the final thing we'll need to do is come down here, and if this is a brand new template that you're just creating now for the first time, this button down at the bottom will be green and it'll say Publish. When you click that, you'll get options for where you want to display this global header. So for me, I've already created this, I've already published it, so mine just gives me the option to update when I make changes. But what we'll do is you can always come to this arrow right here, and there's some save options, and you can click on Display Conditions. So this is what you'll see if you just go to click Publish for the first time. You'll see this pop up, it'll say where do you want to display your template. And yours will look like this, it'll be blank, you won't have anything in there. So you want to add a condition. Now for a lot of people, the default condition that gets added is going to be to include this on the entire site, and that's what you'll want to keep it as. But you may want to use a different header for just your home page. You may want to use a different header or no header at all for some of your checkout pages. If you're using WooCommerce or another shopping cart, you may not want to have this header on some of those pages. So what we can do is we can do include on the entire site. but you can also exclude certain pages. So we can come here and exclude singular, let's say front page. That's going to be the home page that we have set. And we also want to exclude WooCommerce. Let's just do the entire shop. You could do the shop page. You could do different category pages, individual products if you wanted to on single product pages. You can do a lot of different things here with WooCommerce type stuff, but we can just say exclude on the entire shop. So this is going to include it everywhere except on our front page and on all of our WooCommerce pages. You can get really creative and granular with this. You could not do it on your entire site and instead just say, I just want it on a very specific page, and I'm going to choose that page right here, and I'm going to say just display this menu on my About page. A little bit of a silly example, but you get the idea that you can do a singular page, you can do a singular landing page that you create in Elementor, you can do just a singular post or all categories of a post, tons and tons of different options here. But we're just going to leave this on entire site. That's what most people will use. And then you'll have a publish button here if it's the very first time you've gone to publish this. If you're editing it like I am with this one, you'll see save and close. And once you've done that, your menu will be ready to go. And this is just a preview in my browser of the final product. On looking at this on an iPhone 12, we've got our logo here, which will link over to our homepage. We've got our call to action button right here in the middle, and then we've got our hamburger icon that opens up our beautiful menu right there. And we've got our further drop downs as well. And we can see we're on the About page, so this is using our active colors here for that menu. We've got that nice shadow at the bottom, and this menu is sticky to the top of the page as I scroll. So whether it's open or it's closed, as I scroll down the page and read different content, this is always going to stay in the viewport. So there you have it. There is a beautiful mobile responsive menu and global header built using Elementor's theme builder. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll catch you in the next video.